In times of uncertainty, it's easy to look outward for answers, to strategies, plans, and what feels certain. But what if the real guidance comes from within? Today's guest had spent over 25 years in biotech leadership, quietly weaving intuition into even the most data-driven decisions. In this conversation, we explore the power of learning to trust that inner voice, especially when nothing else feels clear. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soft Power Project. Today, I am sitting down with Sonya Weigle, someone who spent over 25 years in biotech leadership. But what really drew me to her is how she blends strategy with intuition in such powerful way. Not only she helps teams to scale, but she guided them through uncertain time. So I'm so excited to talk to you. Hi, Sonya.
Hi, I am so thrilled to be here. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I just feel like this is such a great time to have this conversation because, we're living uncertain times and how do you make decision during this uncertain times? And I feel like intuition is so crucial, but then having a strategy and know how to plan, that's also really important. So I wanted to start it off by asking you this question is that you spent decades operating in such data-driven, high stakes industry like biotech. Do you always know that intuition was really important, or that was something that you found out later in life?
What a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. I feel like I've always operated with my intuition, when I look at some of the decisions I've made in my career, all driven really by the needs of my family. They were very much driven with intuition. I just didn't recognize it as that. But once I was able to start to see that and really kind of channel that into my professional world more directly. So, as opposed to making decisions that impact my external and personal world, instead using that intuition now and sort of channeling it into the leadership and management decisions that I was making, that's when I was really aware of very intentionally bringing intuition into my professional workspace.
Has there ever been a sort of a conflict? Because I think for me, I always think of science as rigid, right? There's a lot of rules. It's so black and white. But when it comes to intuition, it seems like it's not so black and white. But has there ever been like a conflict for you to have to recognize both and kind of compromise and find that balance?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, biotech in particular, science, it's very binary and it needs to be, right? It's very specific and it needs to be very precise. But biotech is interesting because it's the innovation arm of life sciences where we are developing brand new novel therapies for untreated diseases. And so there's the passion and the heart component around creating something that's never been developed before and being able to impact patients and their families and their caregivers in a meaningful way. So what we do is really tied to the patient outcome and patient advocacy, which I think
Mm.
requires and benefits from intuition in that, in how you lead and making sure that that patient focus stays at the forefront of what you're doing, all within the confines and the boundaries of the compliance and regulatory driven work that we do. But that layer of intuition, when it's really harnessed and recognized in how you lead your teams and how you make your decisions, that's really where the blend comes in. So I don't think it has to be a conflict. I think it can be very
Hmm.
much a complement to to the work that we do in this space.
Yeah, because I know that what you do is actually you help a lot of teams to scale, going from small to medium to large teams. And I think a lot of when you grow, there is a lot of growing pains, right? People do need it to change and they need to understand that maybe the way they've done things before will not work anymore and they have to recognize that. So what's your experience like kind of helping people navigating through that process and how that has helped you to kind of pivot through so many different life transitions?
Sure. So, whenever I'm talking with a CEO, their executive team, the board about scaling from one stage to the next, I always kind of take it back to, okay, so how are we defining success here? What are the behavioral competencies, the cultural components, the values and things that we want to take with us, regardless of how quickly or how broadly we grow? There are some things that are resonant within our organizational DNA that makes us who we are as an organization that need to remain, even if that changes a bit, right? So communication is important here, and that's what got us here. But the way we communicate will likely change the larger we get, right?
Mm,
So, but there's a foundational pedestal that we're going to build this organization on. And it's through that lens that we're going to grow the organization. So everyone that we introduce to the organization as a potential employee, as a candidate, is evaluated through the lens of those value drivers so that we know that people are in line and aligned with how we see the world before they even come in. And the candidate understands the world that they're coming into. And so that's how you retain the fabric of the organization, which can grow and can stretch and change as needed, but it's foundational. So we want to create something that where we don't get crushed under the weight of our own success in terms of our ways of working and how we identify with one another and how we identify success. And that's really how you preserve that. But it really does start from the very beginning.
mm. I mean, I'm so curious because I feel like just recognizing one's DNA, that could be a bit of a challenge, right? Because I feel like maybe when we're working, we focus so much on the execution of day to day. We don't really think about culture. And usually when people think about culture is really when there is a issue, when
Yeah.
there's morale issues or anything like that. Yeah, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, you are exactly right. A lot of my work has been in the M&A integration space in life sciences. We're merging two organizations or we're acquiring one. And, you know, I will often be engaged ideally during the due diligence phase of contemplating transaction to really look at the people, process, and culture components of that integration. These things fail 80% of the time because when you bring two organizations together on paper and with the financials and everything, it all looks really great. But then in actuality, you've got two very different cultures, very different sets of values, two very different ways of working. And there have been no intentional decisions made around, are we a consensus driven organization or are we nimble and we move quickly, and which one puts out? We've got two CFOs. Which one do we choose? Even those organizational structural, we've got this set of systems and this set of systems. Which way do we do it? And so where I've seen the most success in M&A integration is when you contemplate those cultural conditions beforehand. To your
Yeah.
point, most of my work was when I got the call when it's not working. People are not working together. I understand you wanted me to do it this way, but this is the way I've always done it. We've
Mm,
always been a consensus driven organization. We involve everybody in our discussions. But now the acquirer wants us to move fast and leave people out of the discussion. And so it's my job to come in and see if we can fix it. So it's nice job security for me, but ideally in a scenario, they would have considered all of that before they even engaged in the conversation.
mhm. But I think I don't really think people intentionally think about, oh, that could be an issue, right, down the road. We should really think about that because change is so hard. I mean, is there any tool that you often will have to guide your clients during that process when they have to change, but they have the resistance?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, change management is sort of a time honored component that is often ignored or not recognized till you're starting to feel the pain. And a lot of times, people think of HR as something they can think of later. I only need to think of HR when I have to scale the organization because I need recruiting done. And, that is a very short-sighted way of thinking of things, because even in biotechnology or really any industry, your biggest product is your people. It's your people, right? These are not bots, they're not drones, they're people. And so addressing these things strategically and adding that to the strategy is really the only way to ensure a successful outcome. And relegating HR to the sidelines to say, well, we'll think about that when we have to hire people, without thinking about all of these other things, is a recipe for disaster that happens over and over and over again. And it's important that leaders see that. I had a visionary leader, CEO, who called me in advance of commercializing his organization to say, does my leadership team have the behavioral competencies, and does the organization have the values and the culture to welcome a commercial organization in? Are we ready for that? I mean, to have a CEO ask you that before they go forward was just, it was a wow. And so I was like, let's do this. And so the answer was
Yeah.
no. And so, you know, so the great thing was, it was like, well, help us create that, and we will do this in parallel to our pursuit of an FDA approval so that we can
Yeah. Yeah.
build a commercial organization and take this drug to market, which is the pinnacle of success, of any biotech. So, that was a great success story. That was a lot of fun, and it really did yield phenomenal results.
Do you have to usually guide them through any like team exercise or kind of sit down with one-on-one to kind of navigate that process?
Yeah, it usually starts with an assessment of where they currently are.
Mm,
So, it's always an interesting exercise to sit down one on one with people and ask them, what is the culture here? How do you think we define success here? What does employee engagement look like here? Do you know the corporate strategy? Where's the company going? Is it clear to you? Is it clear to
mhm,
your peers? Is it clear to your teams? And, the extent to which there is alignment or not tells a really interesting story, and where there's no clear understanding or consistent true north that everybody's pointing to, then the level of work that you have to do. And sometimes, things like culture are evolving, right? And so, but values really should stay consistent. So, as we move from one phase to the other, we may need to move faster. We may need to involve less people in decision making. We need to, we've got different stakeholders now. Now we've got bigger shareholders. Now maybe we have public shareholders. So the things that we need to do and the ways that we need to work may change. In a smaller company where people wear multiple hats, now we're scaling to the next stage, and it's not just numbers of people, it's skill sets that you're bringing. And so you may find that some people are like, well, wait, I used to be responsible for all of that. And now you're
mhm,
taking this from me, this from me, this from me. That's one way to see it. But another way to see it might be, wow, now we're really adding to the bench strength here. We could move faster. We can reach
right,
harder. But sometimes that change is really hard for people. And so helping
right.
them to bridge that gap is often part of the work as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's such important work. And I'm so curious, and I'm assuming, but please correct me if I'm wrong. You've worked in biotech industry for about 25 years, and is it more of a male-dominated industry? Okay.
It is.
I get it. Yeah. Okay. Because then you also worked with a lot of female leaders and you mentor them. Do you find that women operate differently, and what are the strengths that women tend to have compared to the male peers?
One of the things that I really love about this industry is there are more and more women CEOs and executive leaders in this space all the time. And my personal experience with the men, most of the men that I work with in this space, is they are very receptive to that.
Mm,
And I think it's because in many ways it is binary. The question is, do you know the science? Can you design a trial?
mhm, mhm.
Yes. Fantastic. Moving on, right? So it's I've worked in other industries like commercial real estate as an example. And, that's a very different focus. Still I was very often the only woman in the room. And it was very apparent to me that I was the only. There's been less fighting for my voice to be heard in spaces in biotech. But that said, when I see a female leader in these spaces, particularly a woman CEO, again, it's that innate intuition that comes to the table where, it's leading with that patient first component. I think is just such a wonderful thing to see. And I don't think it's not that the men don't bring that, but it's in the way that we lead. I watch women champion other women. I watch women look for opportunities to bring women up through the organization, to give women voices, mentor younger women in space. Doing things to actively bring young women into STEM and into the sciences. And again, I mean, it's not an either or. I've seen many men. I've benefited from men doing these same things for me. But it's just so interesting and compelling to watch the way that women support one another in this space.
That's so powerful because I think nothing is more powerful than women helping other women, especially mentoring younger women and bring these next generation, right, to in their career path, building their career path and helping them through that. I've known a lot of different industries. I was in finance before, I was also in tech before. I find that in certain situations that's not really the case. Sometimes women don't tend to help other women because I think we feel this competitiveness like, oh, there's only limited seats for us. But I
Yes.
think what you pointed out before was that science, it is binary, but either you understand or you don't. And if you do, then, that's evidence for me, then I can trust you. That just, to me, is just like, oh, that's
Yeah.
so nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a subtle difference. I've done consumer products, I've done financial services, I've been in those industries as well. And, I just always tap back to life sciences because because the work that we do and the outcome that it brings is just really, and in biotech in particular, it's really nice because your access to the patient is so direct. And so you really do feel the impact of the work that you're doing, regardless. I mean, I'm not the scientist, right? So, that's not my job. But I do have the privilege of working with and equipping and upskilling the folks that do that. And that to me is extraordinarily rewarding.
Mm, right. Oh, I love that. And I have to ask you, because I remember in our chat before the recording, we talked about how women in science tend to have this ability to focus on the good or be able to focus on the things that they want to focus, or maybe the things that's within our control. And I need to know what's that like? And also, how do I gain more of that muscle? Because sometimes I feel like navigating life without trying, I would prioritize the problems first or the things I just cannot solve. Instead, I wouldn't actually focus on the things that's good and right in front of me. So yeah, so I just wanted to know if there's sort of a tool for us, for the people that are not in science, what we can learn from the women in science.
Yeah, I don't think it's limited to just science. I think this is as an individual, you make the active choice to center yourself and to give yourself permission to do that. And, I find that over the last 25, 30 years in the workforce, that's becoming more and more accepted. Whereas, when I first started in my career, your obligation was performance and that was it, perform. And as a woman in the workforce, it was perform the way the men do. And so, you weren't centering yourself at all. You put yourself on a shelf for the day and you embodied what it is that the workforce required you to be. And then if you're lucky, you find her again on your way home. But as time as time progresses and you do that more and more and you get more and more proficient at embodying the person that they require you to be, your real self gets further and further and further from you. And that impacts your home life, that impacts your value system. And at some point, you recognize it if you're lucky and you say, wait, I, I've got to go find her again. And, that for me didn't happen until about 2 years ago. And where I made a conscious decision that I am going to recenter myself. And this was after not just embodying the person that the professional world expected me to be, but it was also prioritizing my role as wife for almost 30 years, as a mother for almost 28 years, and all of the other roles that you play, but somewhere you get lost in the middle of it. And, I about 2 years ago was when I realized, I have an opportunity here. My youngest is now a senior in college. I mean, I'm about to be a true empty nester. And so what do I want the next 30 years to look like? And so, the journey that I've taken over the last 2 years to rediscover myself, to create a new set of non-negotiables that are driven by my intuition, to understand what I want this next chapter to look like, and to not allow anybody, most of which
Mm,
myself, to deviate from that picture. And I think that's how you do it, regardless of the industry you're in. That's how you do it. You've got to make a conscious choice to center yourself and your value system. And in some cases, like in mine, it was a 2-year journey to figure out who she was, you know? And I had to go back to my childhood. What brought me joy when I was a little kid? Where did that go? I now have optionality that I didn't have before. My children are grown. They're actively pursuing their own dreams, which is wonderful. Exactly what I want them to be doing. That leaves emotional and mental space for me to recenter myself. So I'm not going to lose this opportunity. You get to 25, 30 years of lived professional and personal experience. You've got some arrows in your quiver. You've got some
yeah.
skills and some experience and some connections and networks and other things that you can now direct inwardly and become a self-beneficiary of all the power that you're bringing and sending out to the world. What happens when you do that? And what does that look like?
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Do you mind sharing with us what are your non-negotiables? I'm so
Yes.
curious. Yeah.
They evolved over time, but and it's funny that you mentioned how early we're meeting today. One of my non-negotiables right now are no meetings before 10 a.m.
Oh, no.
Yes, I will for you today. Unless it's something that I
Thank
want
you.
to do, that I
Okay.
consider to be fun and something that
Uh-huh.
serves me. But really, no, nothing that depletes me before 10. I have come to cherish and protect my soft mornings where because so many years it was get them up, get them dressed, get them out, get them school. It was, you know, emails from my CEO, texts from and this is what you do. It's what you have to do. But I don't have to do that now, right? Because I have architected and curated a next chapter that gives me the freedom to do that. And defining that freedom is important. And then planning according to that freedom is critical. And I decided that location freedom is something that I wanted. Time freedom is something that I wanted. Financial freedom is something that I wanted. So any plan around my next chapter adheres to those as non-negotiables. If this does adhere to what I consider to be time, location, or financial freedom, I am not doing it. And part of that for me is starting every day very intentionally, where I have time to, I still wake up early. I'm a morning person, but, I have time to meditate. I have time to pray. I have time to journal, time to plan like my day. I have time to have a nice cup of coffee with my husband. I have time to work out, and it's just starting my day that way for me sets the stage for everything else. And I'm just calm, cool, and collected through my whole day. I'm not crazed or frazzled or stressed or any of that. And my performance goes up, doesn't it?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I think mornings are just incredibly important. Just like you said, it sets the tone. And yes, you're always so grounded and so calming when I talk to you. So it definitely shows. And thank you again for making this an exception for
Of
me.
course, happy to do it. I was thrilled.
Yeah. Do you have any non-negotiable when it comes to certain relationship with certain people and certain behavior, where you just like, no, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Another thing about intuition, if you really tune into it, it will tell you. It will tell you. You'll feel it. And for me, I feel it right in my chest. If somebody's energy is off, we don't ever need to talk again. Because I'm at a place in my life where, my energy, it will not be harvested
Mm,
any circumstances. So even in the professional world, I am very, very good now at compartmentalizing where I invest my time and my energy and where I don't. On a macro level, that's, client opportunities. If it could be the greatest opportunity in the world, but I have come to understand that all money is not good money. Not all opportunity is good opportunity. And if I know that this is going to me, deplete me, not honor my non-negotiables, I will not entertain. And I've walked away from some opportunities this year.
mm,
I'm fine with it. Because guess what happens when you do that? Then the door's open for an opportunity that is aligned. And you think to yourself, wow, now this is fun. This lights me up. This gives me energy. It doesn't take my energy. And wouldn't it have been a shame if I had been depleting myself over here when I could be enjoying myself over here?
yeah. Oh, I love that sentence. It's so powerful. My energy is not to be harvested, right? I love that because it is when people access your energy, if they want something from you, they are actually harvesting your beautiful energy, your positivity, and that just drains you. And and I feel like setting boundaries, that's such a big, I mean, life lessons for me. Setting it and actually holding it. I think what you're saying is that you actually non-negotiable is actually just like holding that boundaries, right?
Exactly. 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 It's funny because I don't even use the word boundary anymore
Mm,
because to me, it's negotiable then. That leaves you room to expand the boundary, open it up. But, that non negotiable is such a true north for me. And working with women to find those same non-negotiables, to identify those boundaries. There's so much joy for me in that because you just see the release that comes. These are very, very capable, accomplished women who are used to doing really hard things and doing them well.
mhm.
But the hardest thing is centering yourself, rediscovering your value set and setting those non-negotiables. It's the hardest thing for women to do and to allow themselves the luxury of doing it.
And I remember you kept mentioning that if you're lucky, right? And then you get to really understand and tap back to who you really are. So you mentioned that that was 2 years ago for you. Was there a particular moment that you realized that I can't do this anymore, or I really needed to find who I was?
There was I will never forget this moment. So, I was having a conversation with my then sophomore in college, my youngest, she's a senior now. And, it was October of her sophomore year, and so she was thinking about, "I've gotta declare a major. I need an internship. What am I gonna do?" And she's a very, very bright, very energetic and engaging. She's just I call her Buzzy. She's just buzzy, and I'm just enjoying watching her kind of go through this. And, I've done this with my older two. And so I was sort of really sitting in this with her because I realized this would be the last of these types of conversations I get to have with my children because the other two are, fully flown. And I just enjoyed that so much. And I was like, boy, she has her whole life ahead of her. And then after I finished with her, I kind of sat with that and I was like, wait a minute. I have my whole life ahead of me too, with the added benefit of 30 additional years of lived experience. So if I have my whole life ahead of me, what do I want to be when I grow up? And that was the moment when I was like, I need to figure that out. I need to, with as much rigor as she is, I need to plan my next chapter. And that was the moment.
I think a lot of the women that I grew up with, I don't know if it's cultural. Sometimes I find out it's not cultural. I think it's just different generation. A lot of women that I grew up watching, sometimes they could be they could carry this victim mentality with them, and they don't seem to want to grow beyond that or to pivot or reframe. That seems to be really comfortable for them. And it hurts me to watch them, even though they do have the luxury to to choose what they wanted to do. They do have the luxury, but they don't want to. And so to me, that's such a life lesson in itself because I don't ever want it to be that, even though I do understand why, but I don't want that to be my life. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's both cultural and generational. I could say the exact same thing. I mean, in my family, the women in my family pride themselves on doing everything. Listen, I'm talking about my mother's side of the family. Oh, you're one of us for sure. I mean, you can do this, you can do this, you handle it all. And, that was the framework for, being a good woman was being able to handle it. And, I mean, my grandmother was an extraordinary handler of things. I mean, she 6 children, she handled everything. My mother handles everything. So when I'm coming up, it's like, wow, yes, you've got it, you've got it, you've got it. And, so it's very much cultural, but part of my transformation has been an understanding that generationally, that's something that needs to be broken. And I do not want to send that on to my daughters. And I want them to understand it is not their obligation to handle everything. That is not their measure of being a good wife and a good mother and a good human, if they choose to be a wife and a mother. That's not the way we're going to do this. We're going to break this right now. And I think generationally, my kids are, Gen Zers, I guess. And I'm really enjoying watching them take a different approach. I've got very ambitious kids. They're all in their 20s. They're smart. But they're also not willing to give their souls on the altar of their careers as much as they want them. And I think this generation is being very purposeful about holding a boundary and setting their non-negotiables. And I love the fact that they know in their 20s what it took me to get into my 50s to learn. I think that's great for society. I think that's amazing for the world because it doesn't mean you lack skills. It doesn't mean you lack competence. It's just channeled a different way. And it's not covered up with this obligation to perform. Instead, you just perform, and I just think that's a wonderful thing. So I'm so glad that you've recognized these things in your lineage and in your culture, and you've set that boundary to say, I don't need my life to be that way. That's really powerful.
Mm, mm. Thank you. And I think it's just absolutely amazing that you're able to decide that I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to reparent myself, and also I am not going to carry that way. And just like you said, not having that obligation to perform. And I think that obligation often gives women so much resentment later in life because it was so draining and so hard and they're so unhappy, but they don't know why. And it's hard to recognize that because then I think a lot of them, maybe the fear of recognizing that I spent my entire life doing what? Something I did not like to do. And that could bring a lot of fears as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's that's a tough realization, and that was certainly part of my journey as well. As how did I get here? How do I? you know, this can't continue. It's not sustainable. My happiness matters. My joy matters, and I have the capacity to center it and course redefine for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like I have to ask you this because there's so much things happening in the world right now. Too much, too much to even mention. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of jobs that's being replaced because of AI. I mean, I think people are still figuring out what AI can do, cannot do. But I think there's just so much change, right? Uncertainty that's happening. Do you see that the identity crisis collectively that's happening right now, and how has that impact how women see themselves and how they transform or reinvent themselves?
I think it's very interesting what's happening right now for women in particular. We're sort of seeing the dismantling of male dominated systems. And, I personally am here for it. So it's just, I don't mind it at all. I think it's about time. And I think we're finding that women are transforming and they are reclaiming themselves and they are redefining what success looks like. And it starts at the as an individual, but as a collective, it just expands. And we are forcing the restructuring of these things. And and I think for women in my age group, it's very much okay, guess what? It's my turn. It's my time. This is how it's playing out. And I'm watching women redefine what their careers look like, and one of the things I love is the portfolio career. And I've really embodied that myself, where, part of my redefinition is I only want to do things that I really love doing. And I only want to do them with people that I love doing them with. And I only eat, that's just it. That's it. And so how do I build a career around that? And, that's one of the things that I talk to my daughters and their friends about. Create something. And with AI and the technology that you have now, you can do all of that. One of the unintended benefits, in my opinion, of the whole COVID crisis was our ability to operate this way. I mean, look, you and I are talking right now. We would not have been able to talk like this just a few years ago. And this sort of platform gives you a voice to reach people. And it's just this expansion of knowledge. Taking all of this, taking AI and using it for your advantage to create a portfolio career where you only have to do the things you love to do, and you can do them in multiple ways and achieve that financial freedom and that location freedom and those other things, which I think is a really good thing. And so it's just a matter of just shifting your mindset a bit. But yeah, so that's what I see is happening now. I think that's to miss out on the benefit of what's happening here and to channel it in a good way. So you can either focus on all the negative stuff and all the scary stuff, or you can decide that you've ascended beyond that and you're going to focus on yourself and find a way to win it in all of this.
Mm. Well, I think you said it so beautifully. It's that we get to decide. We get to choose what we want our life to be. And then you used the word cultivate, you used the word architect. Just like you get to build that life that you want. So using AI to your benefit, why not? And
Yeah.
instead of fearing what it could be or what it's going to replace, but just use it in a way that actually works for you. And I think a lot of it has to do with just being adaptable and to be agile, right? To learn constantly, because I think it really requires a lot of learning muscles to learn constantly, to read and to take some lessons. And there's an unlimited resource nowadays as well. So I love your mindset about change because I think that's what people need now.
Yeah. I read a really interesting article the other day about how women in their 50s are the unexpected and unintended drivers and beneficiaries of AI. Meaning that, as a generation, look at the things that we've seen. I mean, when I was coming out of college, well, I was in college, email was just sort of coming to be, and then the internet and websites. And, there were definitely people, who were older, they were not really embracing that kind of change and were insisting on, well, you have the phone book. What do you need this for? What, whatever it is. I mean, well, in our professional lifetime, we've seen such an advancement of technology, and we've had to adapt every single time, and we've done it. And so, for this generation, it's like, we're just going to adapt again, you know, and why not? Why not?
Right, right. I think what you said is just absolutely you're right on because you've seen everything, right? You've seen the days without cell phones, obviously. And I mean, I've seen that data as well, and learning how to use it and then adapting it and then incorporating that to our lives. And now we cannot live without it. It's just that whole journey. But the whole thing, the actually the common thread is that you just keep learning,
You
keep
just keep
adapting.
learning. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I have to ask you, I mean, you've coached so many women and mentored so many women and constantly helping people to grow and to adapt. What is your definition of soft power at this point in your life?
Ah, by the way, I love the
Mm,
term soft
mm,
power.
mm,
I just, I'm in love with that. And, I used to talk about how women have the ability there's a silent strength that women have where we can, it's almost like water, how water just can be the shape of something and it's soft and it's quiet and peaceful, but at the same time, it's shaping that rock. Like that's what soft power is. And, but it's powerful if you understand it, you recognize it and you harness it. But it's, and in doing so, you can reshape anything and you can do it in a way that's, it's soft, meaning it's not going to deplete you. It's not going to make you anxious. It's not going
mm,
to make you sad. It's not going to make you stressed. It's not going to, power has always been, when you embody, especially women embody power the way that, you know, typical, we have in a male fashion, right? So, in the days when you had to embody that male persona in order to succeed, that was not soft power. Real soft power is we can embody our true selves and still move barriers, still accomplish things, still do the hard things, but we don't have to harden ourselves in order to do it. I think that's what soft power would be to me.
mm. I agree. I love it. And you mentioned that you enjoy soft morning. So I'm going to call that too my soft morning.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and like water, and I do feel like there is this one essence that a lot of us like who believed in soft power do have is patience. Not that I'm saying I'm a very patient person,
Me either.
but it but I feel like it does require that time, right? Willingness to just wait, pause, right? To not to hurry.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of things, right? And so it's in how we react to things. I mean, outside of soft power sits a base of emotional dysregulation. And emotional dysregulation is reactive, whereas emotional regulation is responsive. And when you are sitting in your power and you recognize it and you know you have it, timing your responses to things, being very intentional about your words, allowing people time to speak and to be seen, not feeling the need to jump ahead and have the next answer prepared. All of those things, there's a whole lot of power in that softness. It's not weakness at all. And understanding that that there's a strength in being able to do that. And and when I see women wield that strength, when I recognize it in other, it is so cool to see. So, when you're in a room and, you're the only woman in the room or you're one of few, the old way, the dysregulated way, the harder way of doing it would be to say all of the words you need to say to justify your presence there and to and to bring, to offer that credibility. I've done this and this is my experience and blah 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 blah. The soft power way of doing that doesn't require many words at all. Your very presence, the way that you approach, the way that you own the room, just, it's almost a nonverbal power where it's not questioned because men don't justify their ability to say it. No, they don't. We don't need to do that either because most of us are coming in with pedigrees and experience and everything else, right? So, you don't need to do that. And understanding your power, I mean, just the way you speak. So, no.
That is such a powerful mindset. And what would you say to the women now who's about to enter, let's say, boardrooms? They have been promoted, but they're going to be working with a lot of men, a lot of, the men who occupies that space. What would you say to them to kind of prep them for this stage in their life?
Yeah, I think it's an internal prep less than an external prep, right? I mean, if you've gotten to the place where you've gotten promoted, you've been invited to the boardroom, your experience, your credibility speaks for itself, right? So I would say, deprioritize needing to prove yourself. You've already done that, obviously. And instead let the work speak for itself. I had somebody ask me, you've had a lot of career opportunities come your way. How did you make that happen? And I said, well, there was no active intention on my part to make it happen. I just let my results speak for themselves. I do what I say I'm the, I am trusted because I deliver. And there are not a lot of words. There's not a lot of campaigning. There's not none of that is needed.
Mhm.
The work speaks for itself.
It's that quiet confidence that you have in yourself, right?
Yeah, it's internal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. I feel like I can ask you endless questions. Like we could do this for hours, but then again, I wanted to leave you to your soft morning.
I feel like we could go on forever too. This has been so great.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much for being here with me. And again, the fact that I'm in Taiwan, you're in the States and making this possible, it's really cool.
It is really cool. It's like I feel like we're in the same room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'm going to leave all your information in the show notes below, and I'm going to make sure that everyone can find you. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it so much.